Are you ready? Ready? You guys ready? I'm going to turn this. Okay, good. Good evening. I'd like to bring the August 27th San Mateo Planning Commission meeting to order. Let's please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner John Ebneter. Commissioner Ramiro Maldonado.
Present.
Commissioner Margaret Williams.
Present.
Vice Chair Ellen Mallory.
Present.
Chair Mike Etheridge.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, first item on the consent calendar are the meeting minutes from August 13, 2019. Did anybody have any comments or feedback on the minutes that were provided? Okay, can I have a motion to approve, please?
I motion that we approve the August 13 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes 5-0. Okay, do we have any speakers' slips for public comment on any items not on the agenda?
I do not.
Okay, anybody interested in public comment on something not on the agenda? All right. We will move ahead then to item number 2 on the consent calendar, study session for the underground flow equalization system.
Thank you, Chair Etheridge and Commissioners. I'm Brad Underwood. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of San Mateo.
Can't hear me, okay.
It's
See
on.
what I can do here. That should be better, I think. All right. So here tonight, as you indicated, for a study session on the underground flow equalization system. As you recall, we were here in April 9th to present to the Planning Commission for the draft environmental document. And so we, at that time, there were some questions that couldn't be answered from my understanding, and so we're back here to talk to you about those issues that you had questions about, and also the public. So I'm going to give you a little bit about the agenda tonight. I'm going to give you a brief background of the project. You got the wrong PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so give us a minute. I thought the slide didn't look familiar to me, so. You guys got to download it? I could do a song and dance for you for a minute if you like. Just kidding.
Filibuster.
Right. Not off to a good start. We were making edits earlier today, so apologize for this.
Should we take a quick break while you're looking for
You could do that if you like.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, we'll come back from our break, and we will let Mr. Underwood pick up where we left off on item number 2, study session.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Again, apologize for a little faux pas here with our PowerPoint, but we were working on it later this afternoon. So again, Brad Underwood, Public Works Director, here to talk about the underground flow equalization system and bring you some background today, and also talk about the outreach activities we've had. And then Court Harris with Jacobs, one of our partners in working on these projects, will be talking about the construction impacts and the monitoring we intend to do with this project, which I think is the heart of what you want to hear today. And then we'll have questions and answers for you after that. So a little bit about why the project's needed. On the left there, you see sewage flowing out of a manhole. This is at Delaware Street, and this is typical when we have heavy rains in this area. So several years ago, we received a cease and desist order from the Water Board to stop this kind of activity because this reaches our creeks and our lagoon and then into the bay. So obviously not a healthy environment for anyone to be able to experience. So the program is providing capacity and to optimize the collection system so we can perform collection system and manage this kind of type of wet weather flow so that we don't have these conditions. Just a reminder, this approach was approved through a programmatic EI environmental document and approved by the City Council a few years back. And then after looking at the various sites, potential sites in this area, because this is kind of the heart of where this happens, it was the council chose the event center site, which is what we're talking about today. So on this picture here, on the left-hand side, we actually put in 4 or 5 Baker tanks out there every winter time. And this is just south of 25th Avenue on Delaware. And we have those connected to one of these manholes that overflows. And so when the water rises up, we're able to store only 80,000 gallons. So it's not enough to actually to take the full load in many of the storms, but it does take part of it, and we actually save some sanitary sewer overflows by having this in place. So obviously there's a need for something at this location. On the right-hand side, you see just kind of a picture of where we've seen sanitary sewer overflows, are the blue dots. The larger ones are where we see more intensity. And in this area here specifically, conveniently, there's a catch basin right across the street where the sewer comes out, goes into the catch basin, flows into Boral Creek, which obviously runs through the Fiesta Gardens neighborhood, into the lagoon, and then obviously that gets out in the bay. So on community engagement, we've had over 50 community engagements with various meetings before Public Works Commission, Planning Commission, just out in the community itself. I probably attended 95% of those meetings, so highly involved in this process. We had before you again on April 9th to talk to you about the draft environmental impact report, the special use permit, and the SPAR. At that time, you had some questions that we were not able to fully answer for you and the public as well, so we appreciate you providing us the opportunity tonight with this study session to be able to provide those answers. We did have a community meeting following that April 9th meeting, recognizing we needed to hear more from the community about the construction impacts. That meeting was very well attended, over 90 attendees at the meeting, so we were very pleased with that. So we feel we've got great feedback from the community, which is important for the success of this project. So some of the key items of concern, both from the commissioners and from the community, are the construction approach, the visual impacts, just construction activities like piling and shoring, street closures, how are we going to deal with pedestrians and bicycles, and then just the impacts that normal construction activity has, so the noise, dust, vibration, and traffic. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Court now, so he's going to run through several of these items, then I'll return back to close out the presentation.
Thanks, Brad. Commissioners, thank you. Let's start by looking again at the project site for the underground flow equalization system, or UFES, as we'll call it tonight. On the screen before you, you can see the underground structure is generally located in the event center storage and parking lot. Part of the project will be constructing the electrical building, an above-grade electrical building over in the northeast corner. The edge of the excavation, the edge of our structure, is about 350 feet from the nearest Bay Meadows homes and about 150 feet from the nearest Fiesta Gardens homes. The tank has a general capacity of about 5.3 million gallons. It's approximately 150 feet wide, 200 feet long. Plan to use it about 20 times per year. Right now, we're anticipating construction to be completed in 2023. The pipes that come into the facility are the diversion sewer and the force main. And another key aspect of this facility is the odor control over in this corner of the facility, and that runs continuously. At the end of the project, this is approximately what the site will look like. You can see that we're going to have new landscaping and a new CMU wall along Saratoga. Our electrical building is located up here in this corner near the existing Bay Meadows pump station. We're also going to replace the CMU wall, build a new CMU wall along Bay Meadows Park, put some new trees there. The site will be refinished as it is currently. It'll be a parking lot, so this will be paved. We'll have some hatches for accessibility. The event center parking area will be restored. We're using part of this area for the construction, but when we're done, that'll be returned back to pavement and parking. And then our odor control facility is located up here away from the park. I want to give you a couple pictures of before and after of what this is going to look like from the outside. This is a picture taken from across Saratoga near the Bay Meadows pump station before. After we build our project, you'll see that we'll have a new CMU wall along the frontage. You can see the outline and the shape of the electrical building, and there'll be some new plantings. If we move down the street towards the event center entrance near Event Center Drive in Saratoga, this is looking back towards the main entrance. Once our project's completed, we'll have a new 8-foot tall CMU wall along Saratoga, new plantings. The event center will have a new fence, screening fence along its entryway. And then we're also providing improved pedestrian access to the event center. Right now, it's hard for pedestrians to come around that corner and walk safely down into the event center. So we'll be adding a new sidewalk that accompanies that fence down into the event center. And finally, here's another close-up of the actual site from the sidewalk in front off of Saratoga. This is a perspective someone will see as they're looking at the facility. They'll see the CMU wall and our new treated air vent. It sits about 4 feet above the wall, and it's about 16 inches in diameter. This slide illustrates the different construction phases in the overall schedule for the project. It's kind of divided into two sides. So on the left, above the orange bar, we have the heavy construction activities. And there's 5 phases there that are listed with their respective durations. And on the right, we've got some of the end activities. So we've got these 5 more heavy construction activities that will be going on at the site. But at the same time, we're also staggering our sewer construction along Delaware and Saratoga Avenue over a course of about 12 to 15 months. We'll talk about that in a little bit of why that's an improvement and how that helps mitigate traffic. But as you'll notice on the bottom bars, we have a description of the types of monitoring that we'll be doing during the different construction activities. So during heavy construction, we're going to monitor for noise, dust, vibration. We'll monitor groundwater levels, and we'll monitor settlement. And then as we get past the heavy construction off to the right, you see where it says Phase 6, that's site finishing. Really, the bulk of the heavy work is done at that point. And so our monitoring after that will really just be confined to groundwater monitoring and settlement monitoring. The construction hours that are allowed for this project are typically Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We anticipate that the typical construction day will be about 8 to 10 hours. Right now, we don't have any anticipated construction work outside of those hours on the weekends or beyond the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. window. There may be some exceptions that a contractor can apply for, and the city may approve that with conditions. An example of that is often during the concrete work, when they are trying to complete a certain part of the project over a specific time period. So let's talk about the different impacts. we had that meeting in May, and we had an opportunity to really hear from the community and learn from them firsthand what their concerns were. We heard the stories of people being woken up in the middle of the night and people not being able to work during the day from those projects. And we read about and we observed the firsthand settlement from the Concar project. And so we took a hard look at the different construction impacts: noise, dust, settlement, vibration, the traffic impacts that might be associated with this project in conjunction to all of the other projects that are going on concurrently, and then addressing some of the concerns we heard about the pipeline construction. We focus a lot on the site, but some people have really expressed some frustration and concerns about the pipeline construction being in front of their homes. So we'll talk about those tonight. The community had a really bad experience recently in the area. There was a sheet piling project going on that hit bedrock, and it woke people up in the middle of the night, right? It created this horrible noise, and it was this horrible impact. And so one of the things that we did for this project after hearing that is we looked really closely at the types of foundations and shoring methods that we would allow to address the noise concerns. And through that evaluation, we've eliminated the sheet piling method. This is what was used at the Caltrain project site that had that really bad impact. We evaluated and we selected 3 alternatives, and we'll talk about those in a second, that have lower noise levels than sheet piling or other pile methods. For the foundation piles, we evaluated several different types of piles, and we eliminated the hammer-driven piles, the machine that goes bang, 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 that you can hear throughout the neighborhood, or the vibratory methods, and we settled on drilled micropiles for the foundation. The sheet piling wasn't watertight. It wasn't just that it was a noise issue, but it wasn't technically feasible for our project, and so that was the main reason it was eliminated. The non-impact methods that we selected are watertight, and impact and vibratory piling has been eliminated generally for this project altogether. We'll also be providing noise monitoring during construction. I want to focus on the shoring part of this project. You can see on your screen here, this is the site. This outline, generally, that I'm circling is the limits of the underground structure. This is the location of our shoring. The construction equipment is typically a crane. You can see that mounted there. So while we're installing the shoring system, we'll be monitoring for groundwater levels, vibration, settlement, and noise. We looked at 6 different shoring methods. Some of the factors we used are listed here. But the key thing, too, about our site is that it's limited in space. We can't just open up a giant hole. We have to shore it, so we had to do something. But we also really wanted to focus on limiting dewatering. Dewatering is one of the main causes of settlement, and so by picking the right shoring system, we can improve how we dewater the project. The 3 methods that we selected are listed here. On the left, you see slurry walls. In the middle, deep cement soil mixing. And on the right, secant pile walls. And we've settled on these 3. They have similar benefits and similar costs. Each of them creates this watertight wall, essentially, that limits the amount of groundwater we have to remove for the project. They're similar in sound level. They're quieter than the other methods we excluded. And they're installed by digging and augering. If you can see some of the images there, we're using digging devices and augering or drills, so there isn't an impact or a loud, repetitive noise source. Again, sheet piles aren't technically feasible, so we're not allowing that for this project. We're pre-qualifying a contractor right now. The contracting community is getting pre-qualified, and part of that pre-qualification process is really geared towards their experience with any of these 3 different shoring systems. We didn't want to just pick one. Certain contractors have different experience levels with different kinds of shoring. So we want to get what's best for the project. These all work, we'll get a good price, and we think that that's the right approach for constructing the shoring. Let's talk about the piles. After the shoring wall is completed, you can see here, and we've excavated the bottom of the excavation, we're going to install the foundation piles. And this takes about 2 months. And we're going to install about 270 micro piles, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. While we're doing this, we're monitoring continuously for groundwater levels, vibration, settlement, noise. This is an image of the selected foundation method that we have. It's a small rig. You can see that they're installing these piles. They're small, maybe up to about 12 inches in diameter, and they're actually drilled into the ground, like they're screwed into the ground, so they're not hammered. There's no pile driving. These are quieter. The engineering teams determine these meet our technical requirements. They'll hold our tank in place when it's done. The duration's about the same as the other methods, and there's very minimal vibration. I want to give you an image of the completed facility so you can see how this works. This is the UFES facility. So the top of the structure where it's limited there, you see those hatches, that's what's actually at the surface. The rest of this is all below grade. The bottom of the excavation, that's about 45 to 50 feet deep. And then those micro piles, they'll extend from the bottom of that structure to about 40 feet into the ground where they tie into really good soil. And so you've got this network of toothpicks essentially holding down our structure. Again, just to give you an idea of scale, this thing's about 200 feet long, 150 feet wide, and about 50 feet deep. When we talk about noise, we're trying to mitigate noise impacts. It's important to understand the requirements. So the city ordinance is requiring a 90 decibel threshold or less at the property boundary or the site boundary. And if you can put that in context, looking at this sound thermometer here, you can see some of the typical noise sources in the community, construction, rock bands. A heavy truck generates about 90 decibels of noise just standing next to it, for context. So our emphasis is controlling the noise at the property boundary, and our noise monitoring program may pick up noise that's outside of our construction limits, and I'll show you why that might happen in a second. So again, a 90 decibel truck might be louder at the property line than our construction. This is a model that we showed that demonstrates how the micropiling construction is actually minimized with the way that our excavation is. So down in the bottom of this excavation, we're installing the micropiles. You can see these curves, those are kind of the sound waves. The sound is actually attenuated inside the hole. And so that's circled over here. The fence line property value has to be 90 decibels or less. We're anticipating that, with relation to the homes across at Fiesta Gardens, about 150 away from the edge of our construction, will be less than about 70 decibels at the property line. And similarly, again, the same view, but only looking over towards Bay Meadows. Distance attenuates sound, so 350 feet away, again, the same function, the sound's attenuated in the hole. We anticipate, again, be less than 70 decibels at the property line. And so to monitor this, we're going to use 2 noise monitoring locations, and they'll be at the boundary of the work area. You can see the images here that show the general locations. And we want to monitor at the fence line. We're putting the monitors in between ourselves, the work area, and the residents. These 2 are adequate for capturing the noise that's closest to the construction impacts. And also, we want to make sure that we're not capturing background noise. So that's why we have 2 of these. The monitors are always checked for errors and anomalies, and if we find anything that goes over the 90 decibel threshold, there'll be an alarm, contractor will stop work, we'll figure out what's causing that, and rectify it and keep moving forward. Dust was another main concern for a lot of folks, and our EIR analysis demonstrated that the project will have very low dust impacts. We ran the models for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We'll have very low impacts. But we're going to specify that we have to be in compliance with the Bay Area regs. And so we're specifying that the contractor has to use best management practices during the portion of the project when there's exposed earth. So quite a long duration. And we're going to visually monitor dust every day. So if we see dust, we can make corrective actions, and we'll actually use a handheld monitor to kind of quantify, how well those corrective actions are working. So here's a couple site pictures. This is the site preparation phase. This lasts about 3 months. This is when the contractor first takes over the site. They're tearing things out. They're bringing equipment on site. There's a lot of exposed dirt. And so one of the key aspects is the dust control during the site clearing. We'll also be installing a lot of our monitoring equipment here, but the important thing to note is that we're monitoring for dust as we're doing these activities. Similarly, during the excavation phase, when we're digging the dirt out of that hole, that'll last about 3 months. Again, we're doing active dust control on site. And when we talk about dust control, there are a lot of different measures that are prescribed by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. This slide shows some of them. You know, we want to sweep the streets, keep the dirt off of the streets. We want to keep truckloads covered so that when they're moving back and forth in the neighborhood, dust isn't blowing off. Keep the site wet, the watering trucks there showing keeping the ground wet. We can use screens on the fences kind of as a mesh to keep dust from moving off site to slow the wind down. You can use rumble pads or tire washes to keep dirt from going on the street. There's a whole slew of other requirements that we're specifying that are in compliance with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. This is an image showing the handheld dust monitor, and typically our construction manager will walk around that site, around the the yellow area, looking for dust, monitoring, and helping make corrective actions. So settlement was a very key issue for the community, and we recognize that, you know, for this type of construction, when you lower the groundwater table, that is the primary cause of settlement. You know, we saw that with the Concar project. We understand this. Since 2017, the program, the city, have been monitoring groundwater in the project area, and the yellow stars on that figure there show you where we have existing monitoring wells. And over the course of this monitoring, we've recognized that groundwater actually fluctuates naturally in this area, on average 3 to 5 feet. So there's seasonal groundwater fluctuation of 3 to 5 feet happening right now. And we've taken this approach with our design that really reduces the amount of groundwater removal. So we've got this seasonal fluctuation, but our project right now, we're trying to keep this as watertight as possible. And so we're requiring that watertight shoring system. This is a very different approach than Concar, and I'll show you why. We've got the existing monitoring wells. Those are the black circles inside the yellow box there. In addition, we're going to put additional wells around the excavation in the project area. We'll install 4 new wells, generally just on the outside of this yellow box, and those will be used to monitor the groundwater withdrawal inside the yellow box. But we also want to monitor the groundwater levels out in the neighborhood. Again, groundwater levels indicate settlement potential. So by installing some additional wells out in the neighborhood, we can really keep close track of what's happening. The pictures on the right show a typical monitoring well. These are pretty small. They're about the size of a small pizza. The inside has a data logger. That data logger automatically logs the water level, and if it gets below a certain point, it'll trigger an alarm, and we can take action after that. The city is going to review and document all of these water levels for the duration of the project. You know, we've been doing it for 2 years. We'll do it during the project, and as I demonstrated on that schedule slide, we'll do it for a year after most of the heavy work's done, just to make sure we've got a really good understanding of the groundwater impacts. So this graphic shows us how we're going to dewater our project. You can see the vertical gray bars, those are our shoring wall. So I talked about the shoring wall. This is our watertight shoring wall. We're going to install pumps inside of that shoring wall. So we've essentially isolated our tank. You know, we've got this watertight shoring. We're going to pull all the water outside of the inside of it, and that's how we're going to dry it out. Now there will be some groundwater withdrawal on the outside, and that area is called the cone of influence. So you see where I've circled it says yellow less than 10 feet? Our objective is to control that cone of influence to within 10 feet of our shoring wall. And that's really important because we want to keep any impacts we do with dewatering on our site. So you can see the limits of the shoring and then our fence line on our property. Those wells will be in between the property line and the shoring system. And so we'll monitor that water withdrawal there. And if it goes down below a certain threshold, contractor and this construction manager will take action. I wanted to share this graphic with you because this really demonstrates the way that is not feasible for our project. So in this method, you know, we had all the space in the world. We could dig a big hole, and to dewater it, we would put well points around the outside of our excavation. And then really what we do in this method, if this is the method that we're not going to use, this isn't feasible, but it draws the groundwater down, and that cone of influence, you can see it extends far beyond the limits of the excavation. So putting this in context again, showing the Bay Meadows home in relation, we're dewatering from within. We're also monitoring the wells that are away from the UFES site. So we'll monitor the ones that are right next to it, but we're also going to monitor the ones that are in the neighborhood. So we have ongoing groundwater monitoring during construction, near the tank, and out in the neighborhood. This is really the key aspect of limiting settlement potential for the project. We've also committed to doing property inspections as part of a settlement monitoring plan. The homes and the properties in this area will be visually inspected, and their condition will be documented before construction, during construction, and after construction. And so the homes that we've identified here in the blue box between Fiesta Gardens and Bay Meadows will actually do a visual inspection. With the homeowner's permission, we go in, video document, take photos, make notes, and document the condition of that home before we start construction. We'll check it during construction, and we'll check it after. Shifting gears, talking about vibration. Vibration is caused by a lot of different sources, so we're going to collect background vibration data. Traffic, other nearby construction projects can cause vibrations. We're going to baseline the project against those vibrations. And then we're going to do fence line monitoring between our project and, again, on the fence line between Fiesta Gardens and Bay Meadows. We're going to establish these maximum vibration limits that can't be exceeded during construction. This slide shows, the two fence lines. On the right, you can see the vibration monitors. This is an array. It's a linear string of monitors. And we will put those nearest to where we're working along the fence line with the idea that if we're causing vibrations there and we trigger, we're stopping it before it gets too extreme beyond the fence line property. When the vibration is measured, the key thing for vibration monitoring is that it's not an instantaneous peak. For the type of monitoring that we do, it has to hit some level and then sustain it for a duration so that we know that it's something that we're causing. So if we hit that, contractor stops work, we take corrective action, change the activity, change the equipment. Traffic, big issue with the community is traffic. We're aware of all the other planned projects that are going on in this area. There are a lot of development projects that are happening now that are planned, overlapping with our project. And the key to our approach for addressing these traffic concerns really is coordinating with the other city departments and focusing on actively managing the traffic between all of these concurrent projects. So some of the other activities that we did between the last time we talked to you and now is we've updated the EIR with new traffic counts. The city is in progress of obtaining a new easement across the event center, and I'll show you why that's important. It significantly reduces the impacts to traffic along Saratoga by using this new easement. And then we're staggering our conveyance construction, meaning we're going to divvy it up into pieces and parts over time with the idea that if we can coordinate with those other projects and identify when impacts from another project might be happening, if we can hold off, delay, or advance our project, we might be able to avoid stacking cumulative traffic impacts on these key intersections and key arterials. And the other key concern that we heard is providing continuous, safe pedestrian and bicyclist access through the area in a safe way that's well-signed and visible and that the community knows exists. This map shows the existing city's designated haul traffic routes in green. The new easement I talked about that we're looking at and obtaining right now is across the event center. And most of the traffic for the duration of the project will route back and forth across the event center down to Delaware and then out onto any of the other haul routes. This will be 95% of the time. The traffic will go that route, recognizing that the event center does have some blackout dates as part of our use of their easement, that we can't use that. So there will probably be a cumulative of about 1 month, maybe 2 months during the course of a year that traffic will get routed onto Saratoga and then back to the other designated city haul routes. This is really important. This part of the project is when we're placing concrete. This will last about 9 months. We've got a lot of concrete on this project, and so there was concern about concrete trucks queuing up on Saratoga, outside people's homes and in the street. And using this method and getting that easement, the concrete trucks will then be able to queue off of the street and get onto our site where we have room on the southern end. And so for most of the part of the project, all the trucks coming in and out of the site will be queued on our easement, not on Delaware or Saratoga. Let's talk about the other parts of the project. And we focused on the UFES site, but a large part of this project too is building pipelines. So we've got our diversion sewers and our force main and our diversion structure. The diversion structure is located down at the corner of the intersection of Saratoga and Delaware. Our diversion sewer, this line in blue, connects to the existing sewer in Delaware, and that's the pipeline that actually conveys the water during the storm events over to the underground structure. After the storm recedes, the pumps turn on in the structure, and then water pumps back through that green line along the same alignment on Saratoga over to where we tie back in. The pipelines are located in the lanes that are closest to the event center on Saratoga. The community had some concerns about construction along the streets. They asked us about using trenchless methods, and we are in fact using trenchless methods for a large part of the force main construction. In fact, we're using an existing sewer that we're relining and turning that from a gravity sewer into the force main. And so that repurposes that sewer, and that keeps us from having to dig up a whole another part of Saratoga to build that pipe. And then for the Burrell Creek force main crossing, we're going to use a different trenchless technology. I talked briefly about staggering the pipeline construction pieces so that we can avoid traffic impacts. And then again, providing that safe access for bicyclists and pedestrians through the different pockets over the duration of the project. Collection system construction, it's not as deep. We can use temporary shoring systems for the construction. We've got approximately 3,100 feet of open cut pipeline and another 2,200 feet of force main, 3,100 feet only of gravity sewer. But the construction keeps moving along, and the impacts don't just stay there for months on end. So we'll build 100 feet of it, it'll be open, and then we'll go to the next piece, and it keeps moving. And that way, it's a benefit in that methodology because we have less dewatering over time, and that's another big concern, right? Dewatering causes settlement. Well, if we can use open trench construction, the dewatering is really localized, it's temporary, and it moves on, and so that you won't have this big drawdown. And it's very common to see this type of construction. In fact, right now, there's an open cut construction project going on in El Camino Real. It's about 12 feet deep. So that's the similar methodology that will be employed to construct the gravity pipeline. Here are the two examples I talked about earlier for trenchless construction of the force main. We'll use a technology called horizontal directional drilling to cross under Burrell Creek. And that's really a good methodology for us. It has very minimal environmental impacts. You can imagine trying to tear up the Burrell Creek culvert and trying to put a pipe under that. So this avoids a lot of environmental impacts. It's very quick. The second methodology is called cured in place pipelining, and that's where we're going to take that existing sewer pipe and stick a plastic pipe down inside there, harden it in place, and turn it into a pressure pipe. Very cool, great way to use that existing pipe, minimizes the surface impacts. And for reference, that HDD, the horizontal directional drilling crossing, is about 180 feet long, and then the cured in place piece is about 1,900 feet long. This is an image of that diversion structure at Delaware and Saratoga. Just to give you an idea of the size, it's about 25 feet deep, 21 feet wide, 12 feet long, in whichever direction you want to frame that. But it's going to take some time to build that. It's a big structure, and so that'll require some temporary shoring and traffic control in that intersection to be routed around that for about 3 months. Brad, do you want to come up and finish this? Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Underwood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Court. So one of the other critical things we recognize is to be able to communicate with the public through the duration of this project, because obviously we're working right in their neighborhood, right next door. So we want to be able to provide whatever communication we can to keep them informed of what's going on. So we do have a construction hotline that we'll engage with. We'll have live access to someone 24/7, so they'll be able to actually talk to someone if there's an issue out there that they need to talk to someone about. We do have our existing website where we'll be posting updates continually, so that's a place where the public can go every day if they wanted to get regular updates. And then what we intend to do, there was kind of this request about mailers, but sometimes we've actually found mailers don't arrive to some places, unfortunately. We've had that experience, and then it does get kind of costly to send mailers out to everybody in the area. So we thought we could create a board where we post updates actually at the site, so those that are walking in the neighborhood or in the area and have the interest of what's going on, they could actually walk up and see what's going on. We also will be able to email a newsletter out on a regular basis, and then we have, of course, other forms of communication, social media being one of those that we will consider. That's right.
So the last piece of this is the finishing, and the site will get finished. All the heavy construction is done. So this will take about 8 months, but essentially what happens here is all the equipment is gone, but we'll still be completing the facility. We're doing the mechanical and electrical systems, some of the final paving. The grounds will be updated with the landscaping and the perimeter fence and wall, and then we'll start the facility up and test it, and that lasts about 8 months. Then we move into the operations phase. So we anticipate that the facility is going to be used about 20 times per year. It'll require maintenance quarterly, so the city will go out once a quarter and do maintenance for a couple of hours. The odor control system operates continuously, and so it's always on, even during dry weather. After a rainfall event, the holding structure is cleaned with the tipping buckets, and then it's emptied after each use, and then the city inspects that tank after each event. And if something's awry or if it didn't clean, they can clean it again and make sure that all the material's out and that it's clean, ready to use for the next rainfall. This is an example of odor control facilities that we've used at other similar storage facilities. We'll have airtight vaults. These will be surface mounted with the parking lot, as you can see there on the left. And those keep air from escaping into the community. We've got the self-cleaning tipping buckets. These flush all of the material in the tank. And then the odor scrubber is a carbon technology. And this is a really cool technology. It pulls a lot of the foul air, odors out of the air before discharging into the atmosphere. There we go.
That's me for sure. So just a little bit update on the CEQA process, where we're at and where we're going. Back in May 31st, we actually closed the comment period of the CEQA. That was actually extended by quite a few days. We had a request from members of the community to extend that just because there was a little bit of confusion on where to send the comments, and also felt a little bit rushed. So we actually went beyond the legal requirement of number of days. You can see there nearly double the amount of days. So we think we've given the public plenty of opportunity to respond to this project. Out of that process, over 470 responses or comments were received. So the team is finalizing those comments so we can actually get those out and release the final EIR on September 6th. So that'll actually give us exceed the number of days of requirement before we bring it back before you for the public, so that gives them extra days to comment as well. Because we plan on, after releasing that on the 6th of September, we plan on it being before you at your Planning Commission meeting on September 24th for your recommendation of the final EIR and special use permit. And then following that, we plan to go to the City Council on October 21st for their final approval. We hope to start construction in the spring of 2020, and as Court said, one of the things we recognize is the importance of having a quality contractor on this site so that we could actually, achieve the things that Court has shared with you, because sometimes, you have contractors that don't have the experience in this. They might be the low bidder. Not that we have to take the low bidder, but this is a great process to go through in advance so that we've got the contractors we know that can do a good job that'll be giving us a pricing on this project. So just to summarize this, we have been able to take a pause to our efforts here, and the team has worked very hard because we've heard the concerns about the construction that's going to occur at this site. The houses are fairly close, and so we want to be good neighbors during our construction. It's unfortunate we have to be there to do this. It's not fun to disrupt people's lives. But as you can see, we've selected some of the low-impact efforts to do some of the work. We're going to monitor the site to make sure we achieve what we say we're going to achieve. We're going to do mitigation on site actively, so when we notice something, we'll stop work and take care of that issue right away. And then one of I think the good things, and I know the community was concerned about, is just, and you all know well because you approve the projects that go on throughout the city, and so there's a lot happening, especially in this area of Bay Meadows. So we're taking a coordinated effort to traffic management. We've actually got a team, a group within the city. We're meeting with planning and building actively to know what's going on and what the activities are going on at these other sites so that we can kind of know how to position ourselves so we're not on top of each other with some key activities that are going to occur with major vehicles coming in and out of the various sites up there. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Events Center, as they've been very good to work with as far as, us working with them as far as we can just get this extra easement to get traffic off of Saratoga. We think that's a big win for us and the community. Thank you to both you, the commissioners, and the community for all your input and insight and concerns so that we could actually work hard to bring these solutions before you. And obviously, hopefully, we receive our goal with everyone else is to have a successful project. So I want to thank you for your time this evening, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Do my fellow commissioners want to offer questions now, or do you want to wait until after public comment period? We'll wait, okay. We'll wait for the questions until after the public comment. So we'll open the public comment. Do we have any speaker slips?
I do not.
Okay, is there anybody who wants to speak on this project, come on up. And if you haven't already, please fill out a yellow slip after you speak, if you haven't filled one out before you speak.
Vanessa Sewell.
I'll try to make it quick, go through my notes. Thank you for being here, and thanks for having this updated study session. A lot of good information, and we do really appreciate the outreach and follow up with a lot of the concerns. I do want to just stress again that dust controls will be an issue, not necessarily during the day, but after hours. Construction usually ending in the early afternoon, and we really get slammed with high winds about 5 o'clock, when that wind comes off the bay, and it blows right into Bay Meadows neighborhood. So I would really hope that there's still dust monitoring going on at that time. Also was wondering, and I know this is a question, so maybe it won't be able to give information on that if I can find it. Were you planning on building the CME wall along Bay Meadows Park after the construction is completed or before? Because especially with noise mitigation, it would be really beneficial to have an actual wall there instead of just that fence line during the construction process. So your presentation seemed like it was during the finishing after, but we'd love to have something there prior to that. We also really think it's useful to have that easement on Delaware Street, and hope that that continues to be what will end up happening there. I think that'll really help, especially with the concrete lasting 9 months. That'll be the largest impact for traffic noise, especially during off hours. We had construction going in our neighborhood right now, apartment buildings and 4:30 a.m. concrete trucks. So that waking you up in the middle of the night is not so fun. So anything we can do to mitigate that's very appreciated. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Moran.
Hi, I'm Kelly Moran. I'm president of the Bay Meadows Neighborhood Alliance, which is our neighborhood association. We've been working with Fiesta Gardens and United Homeowners to provide coordinated input to you. I've also got a few words I want to say on my own at the end, but I'll start with the Neighborhood Alliance comments. So we worked together to come up with, we've been providing a lot of input at a bunch of different meetings. We really appreciated dialogue with staff and the extra community meeting that they held and all the information they shared. And we pulled all of our interests together into a document that you should have received from Richard Nev. And I just wanted to let you know that's what we're looking for working around, and we'd really appreciate your help. The reason that we're going through this is because there was a true loss in trust in the city and a sense that the city was over-delegating to contractors. And you even hear that tonight. We have a contractor presenting as the construction expert. And that role of what's a role for city staff and what's for contractors is a difficult one for us because we're trying to manage financial issues. But that really puts it a little more burden on this process and the commission to be sure that there are controls on this so that the staff do take care of the citizens' interest in this project in a way that we wouldn't expect to need to actually really nail down in the planning documents and be very clear about. Because that lack of trust, I mean, the proposal in the EIR would have allowed techniques that would have harmed the health and intellectual development of children and those of us who live in the neighborhood. It was very frightening. And the staff said, oh no, we aren't intending to do that. But I've noticed a number of changes in what's going on as a result of this. And I've got to say, I so appreciate that staff have come forward, really listened to our interests, and have been making a lot of adjustments. So that's the main thing I want to say from the point of view of the Bay Meadows Neighborhood Alliance. So now shifting to my own comments, first I want to thank you for serving on the Planning Commission. I sat in those chairs for about 8 years, and it's a lot of work. And I realize how hard it is to work through all these things and learn about it, especially this project. It's a little out of the typical kind of thing that you guys are doing. So thank you for doing that, and really appreciate your time and attention here. We really do wish your help in rebuilding the community trust here and making this process work. We were really disappointed that the responses to the community's questions and comments were not provided in writing prior to this meeting, because we were hoping we'd be able to come in and say, here are the outstanding ends, and we're going to work with the staff on them and let you know that in advance. So instead, that's all going to pile into you right before the commission meeting, and we are really hoping that we can just work it all out with staff beforehand so that when we show up at the meeting, we're saying we're really confident in what's going on, and that's where we'd really like to go. So I'm hoping we'll be able to say that, but I just want to give you the heads up. There could be a lot of stuff coming in right at the end and some loose ends that need to be resolved. In terms of what I heard tonight, in addition to what Vanessa Sewell said that I agree with, the emission stack location continues to be a concern because it's so close to downwind homes. If you look at the wind direction there, it flows straight across the Event Center parking lot to the Fiesta Gardens homes, right? It flows that way. It blows very hard late in the day and the evening, and that's when the dust problem is. I mean, we will have winds that are 4 times higher than they are 2 blocks away in that area. So, and I have a wind gauge on my porch, so I'd be happy to share data with you, but it's very, very windy there. And so that's a problem. Happily, wind helps disperse odors, but the odorous stack would be right next to the sidewalk and the closest location possible to people's homes. So we're very concerned about that. Dust monitoring, Vanessa talked about that. The traffic plans, the people I didn't hear involved in this is the community. So we're really looking for community involvement in that traffic planning. In particular, the community has special expertise with regard to pedestrian and bicycle safety. We've been working with the staff on our traffic action plan, and it's totally around pedestrian pedestrian and bicycle safety. There's some very unsafe elements in the design, and some of the recent construction adjustments in the area have been very unsafe for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I think if we work together, use some examples from best practices elsewhere, we'll be able to work that out. But it's very important that we be part of that. The overlap with the Caltrain station closure is of great concern to us. We're expecting up to 4,000 riders to be left without their commute method, both going in and out each day. Caltrain is providing no provisions for us except for a tiny little shuttle bus that takes 23 people for the trains that have literally hundreds of riders. So we're expecting, if we can't get an accommodation from Caltrain, which we're working really hard on, that we could have thousands of additional cars for the period of that closing on the streets in this neighborhood. It's going to be really a mess. And that's to extend until June or July or August. So that's something I want to make you aware of. That's the kind of special issue that is going to be really hard to manage here. So bottom line here is we may need your help. We're hoping that we can work this out with the city, and I really appreciate your time and attention on this matter. I want to apologize for walking in and out and unfortunately having to walk out again. I'm dealing with an urgent family matter. My father was actually called 25 times in the hour it took me to get here to there for some fraudsters. So I'm going to have to go take care of that for him. But I will be watching on the web, and I very much appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any other speakers?
Good evening, everybody. Greg St. Clair, longtime resident, and I'm speaking on myself, not as a commissioner. Stay up. I think we need more than a little outreach to the neighbors that live alongside it, because sometimes the wall and dust go over the house, go to the next block. So I think we almost need someone to reach out to that whole block on a bi-monthly kind of thing to see if they get feedback from them, or a way to contact the city quickly and easily where they can say we have an issue and not trying to put the fire out a week or two after it's done. I know that in the city a lot of times when you have issues and buildings are closer, like parking garages and the same thing where they use misters to stop the dust. Same thing, and at the same time, they put up sound walls, like at rock concerts, where they put up divider walls. And if we could have something that would do that, if it's feasible, that would maybe eliminate and have that 70 decibels or whatever point it is, have it bounce back if there was a way to do it. Instead of just saying, well, we got 90 at the bottom of the pit, 70 at the top, and hope it doesn't go further and bounce and ricochet. If you could put up a wall and ricochet it back toward the pit, if that would be a way, because that does stop it at rock concerts to avoid people who live in close proximity. And again, I think we need to just have that contact with the public so that if something comes up, it's being rectified, not a week or two as we had in the Heinz projects, where problems were happening, and then we'd get to the city would send someone out, and it would be a month before we'd mitigate it. And by that time it was, we slapped them on the wrist, they won't do it again, and it happened again and again. We don't want to see that. So thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, any other speakers on this topic before I close public comment? Nope. Okay. We'll close public comment. Thank you, everybody. We'll go to questions from the commissioners on, and those can address the staff presentation, the materials, or the public comments that were brought forth. Can I ask you, Commissioner Maldonado, to start, if you have any?
I have a couple of questions about the monitoring systems. You specified in your presentation that there are going to be only 2 monitoring systems. Is that 2 is the max or 2 is the minimum for each, the dust, the vibration, and the noise?
For the noise, we'll specify 2, and that's
That's
the
on the
minimum
on the,
that we'll have, but that's
okay.
also for a site this size, that's the right number. And then for vibration, it's really it's monitoring along that fence line. And so if we could, I'll back up to that image real quick to show you that. That string there, those individuals are each monitors. So each one of those boxes is a monitor. And so we imagine an array of several of those along each fence line. And so it's really creating kind of a curtain of monitoring, along the perimeter there. Okay. And ideally, those can move. So, if the construction's happening on one end of the facility, right, on the far, say, west end, you want to put that string over there closer so that we can monitor what's happening in between that construction point and the closest homes. And so it wouldn't necessarily be a fixed point.
Okay. And then you also talked about that at any times if the levels reach beyond the levels for each individual section where you're going to stop construction. And how about if the contractor violates those levels on a daily basis? Are there anything systems in place for fines or anything that can be done for those types of levels not to be going off every day?
I mean, it's within our power to stop work, and if it's a repeated thing, we can just shut them down, and make them, you have to stop this. We're not going to let you proceed.
Okay.
Our specifications have that power.
Okay. And also, one final question on the monitors. Would that information, that data collected from the monitors on a daily basis be something that the public and the community can look at?
We anticipate putting out reports documenting kind of the status of the overall monitoring and identifying, if there were any exceedances. Generally, this kind of data, it takes a long time to QA/QC that, and I think the best approach is probably just to demonstrate, like, if there were exceedances, here's the date, here's what happened, here's the corrective action. And that's typically what happens on big public infrastructure projects, rather than just a big data dump.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to add to that, because I know Mr. St. Clair had a concern about that with other projects where there are issues come up and then things don't get resolved right away. The difference between that project that he mentioned is it's a development project. This is a city project, so we actually have a construction manager on site working for the city, contract with the city, that is an extra layer for us to make those corrections immediately on the site, because they're there actively every day, while working is going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Romero. Commissioner Abner?
I'd like to defer to my other commissioners.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Mallory?
Thank you for your presentation. If you could go back to the slide that described the slurry wall, the cement deep soil mixing, and the secant piles. I just, for my own information, would like to understand what those are.
Sure, bear with me for 1 second here while I cycle through this for you.
Okay.
That slide?
Yeah.
Right there, okay. So let me explain, I'll explain slurry walls. And so imagine you have a big crane sitting out there, mounted at side, and the slurry wall has a big, almost like a clam shell on it, and so it continues and digs. And if you can see on the bottom image there, it digs down, and as it's digging, it's pulling the dirt out, and we use a slurry that holds that hole open like a paste. And then at the bottom, once that hole's open, you see that blue, that's kind of the clay, it's like a bentonite clay. And then we stick the rebar down in that clay, and then they pump the concrete at the bottom, and as it pumps that concrete up, that lighter slurry gets taken out, and then you do that successively as you move around the perimeter, and that forms the wall, kind of like panels.
Okay.
So that's a slurry wall. For the deep cement soil mixing, you can imagine, like, if you're out in your garden and you're sitting there churning the soil over, and if you were to mix concrete with that and some water over time, that's going to form, and you left it sit there, that forms concrete. It's going to form that concrete. So this thing has a big auger head on it, like a big screw, and it's screwing down into the ground, and as it's screwing around, it's jetting concrete into that soil and mixing it. And so we'll do that successively, overlapping that, and over time that hardens and forms this nice concrete wall. Okay. So that's the deep cement soil mixing. And then secant pile walls, it's similar to the slurry walls in that you're excavating a hole and you're using a bentonite to hold it open, but instead of having big panels of it, you do it in little round cylinders. And so each one's kind of successively cut into each other, and you do that around the perimeter. And when you get done, you can kind of see there on that bottom right-hand corner, it looks like a bunch of soda cans stacked up. That's kind of what it looks like when it's done. So they clear the dirt off of the inside, and you can see the round part of that secant, and that together ties in. And then each of these systems is going to be held back in place with tiebacks. And so that lets us go really deep with a big open hole, and so that we can quickly move through that construction. Because if we didn't have those tiebacks, we would have to brace, and it could potentially take a lot longer to excavate this and build that tank. So the system has this nice watertight wall, and then we've got those tiebacks holding the wall open. And then once we build our tank and we fill it all back in, that wall stays there. We don't take that out. It stays in the ground.
Okay, so you haven't decided which one of these, right?
Well, and it's like Brad was saying, we're really giving this up to the qualifications. We want either, we figure any one of these is good for us. It does the same thing. And so by having that pre-qualification process, we're going to get a contractor that may specialize in one or two of these and really know what they're doing and give us a really good price. But like you said before, we don't want to have somebody that's never done one of these before. So we're taking that extra effort to pre-qualify that contractor. We're going through that process right now. These are the 3 allowable methods that we're actually evaluating those contractors on. They have to show us they've done this before.
Okay,
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
it does.
Okay.
Okay, and then it said in our report that the city will prepare regular construction update memos. I just wondered what regular meant. Is that every week? Is it every month? Is it?
Yeah, I think right now we plan on monthly. And this is not just the neighbors along 28th or Saratoga. This is both neighborhoods is really where we want to communicate because they're obviously getting impacted by, the traffic. Everybody is. Maybe not everybody's getting impacted by any noise or whatnot. But so we want to communicate with the entire neighborhoods.
So, given that the Fiesta Gardens houses are 150 feet, and the Bay Meadows are, 350 feet, is there going to be a difference in any of these methods between 150 feet and 350 feet? Is it going to, whatever we choose, it's going to be a positive thing equally for both of them, or are we basing it on 150 feet?
I think the key thing here is that we're really basing this on the property line. So if we can meet all of our criteria for vibration, noise, settlement, and everything else, will it be louder at Fiesta Gardens than it will be at Bay Meadows with the extra 250 feet or 200 feet? Maybe. But the key
But you're
thing
going
is,
to that property line, not.
Yeah,
Okay.
we want to control it at the property line because that's what we can control. There can be a truck that rolls down Fiesta with a Jake brake on that's 110 decibels, and that'll trip our alarm if it's consistent. And so we want to control our sources at that property line and really be, advocating for the controls that we can manage on our site.
Okay. And then as far as the watering plan for the dust, one of the speakers made a good point, I thought, that when the construction's done and the trucks leave, seems to be when the wind picks up. So is there a plan to go beyond the construction period for the watering?
So I know they experienced when the event center did their paving project. I think that's what they experienced there as well. And so I think we can look at some opportunities we might have to be able to identify methods where we can make that happen after hours. Definitely want to make sure I heard the concern, and I think we definitely want to make sure we avoid that as much as possible. So we'll have to do some more thinking about that and try to cover that concern they have.
You lost me on the groundwater movement. So there was the 3 to 5 feet of groundwater movement is a regular occurrence, right? So what does that mean? Define that for me.
Sure. So what that means is that right now, the groundwater in this area, where we have our wells, seasonally goes up and down 3 to 5 feet. And so we've been able to kind of track that. So over the course of the year, we can say that in April, the groundwater might be 5 feet below the ground, and in October, it might be 10 feet below the ground.
Okay.
Whatever. And so, but that's important because, as we're monitoring that drawdown level we want to also know that we might see the groundwater start to drop. Well, that could be the seasonal variation, right? And so as we're dewatering, it's going to be really, they're keeping track of the pumping rate, but also saying we've reached some kind of baseline, the groundwater's not moving, everybody's happy. Well, then the groundwater starts to go down or come up, whatever that is. So it's the reason why our geotechnical engineers have been really focusing on the groundwater in this area, is to understand what that means. And so that we're not creating a false sense of that we're dewatering the neighborhood, or conversely, something else is happening.
Okay.
So keeping track of that. But I thought it was interesting to know, your groundwater goes up and down.
That's scary. Again,
That's why
just
our stucco's cracked.
yeah.
My house.
For the visual inspections going on with the homes, and you're saying you're going to videotape every home that you are doing a visual inspection of, inside and out?
Inside and out.
Okay.
That's a pretty standard practice.
Is it? Because that's a lot of houses. I was curious what the event center blackout dates are. You said it equates about a month a year.
So they have an event they just put on with Facebook. So that's a one-day event, but also the fair, and they have a few other consistent events. So we're working with them, and our contractor will know that you have to limit the work that you're doing there. You're not going to bring concrete trucks or hauling off dirt on those days. So we don't want to contribute to the traffic, and then obviously they've got the event going on and so forth as well. So that's what was one of their requirements. So we're working with them on that.
And then there was a mention of the Caltrain closure. I think Kelly mentioned it, and how that will affect. Is that in the movement of the station north?
Yeah, so in order to connect the tracks at both ends, the train station has to be closed. So that will happen probably the latter end of this year or beginning of next year, and it'll be about a 6-month period. So don't know quite yet what our overlap will be. As I said, we look towards going in spring of 2020. That overlap could be 3 months, it could be 2 months, it could be nothing. So we'll be monitoring that. I know Caltrain is interested in incentivizing their contractor if they can finish earlier than the window that they've given them, so that the station gets open sooner. So we're aware. We're working with that's our project too. So we're working with Caltrain and the residents, and so obviously that does have an impact, as was said, but. We just don't know, because we don't know when we're going to get started, but we're aware of it, and we're going to want to see what we can do to minimize impacts there too.
And I think that was all I had right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams?
Great. Yeah, that was an interesting presentation. It's an interesting project. I learned a lot. I think I understood it. I just wanted to make one clarification, because one of the speakers mentioned that that the information tonight was coming from the contractor, but you're really with the design and engineering team, right? Are you with Stantec?
I'm with Jacobs.
Jacob.
So we're the program manager working directly with and for the city.
So one of the things I noticed is the construction documents or the design documents don't have any information about the project team. And it might be helpful to have that, so that because I'm sure there's an acoustical engineer and a soils engineer and a shoring engineer. Well, maybe that's a design build item, but I'm sure there's this whole team of people that are part of this. So I think that would be helpful to see that on the documents. Does just because there's a lot of engineering going on, obviously. I had a couple questions. I thought it was interesting that you talked a lot about all the monitoring that's in place, and yet the dust monitoring is handheld by, like, probably the project manager on the contractor side. Why is that a handheld device? Like, I don't understand that.
So there's no actionable threshold right now for dust.
Oh, okay.
As part of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We've modeled this and we've demonstrated that the site is not going to exceed any thresholds for dust. The idea behind having that handheld device is it's really easy for you or I to stand out there and say, that's dust. Well, how much dust is that? Is it more than yesterday? Is doing what you said, like, is watering it or covering it, reducing that dust? Well, it doesn't look as bad as yesterday. Having that little monitor there can help quantify that. And so it's really kind of a quality measure that our construction manager can use to help that contractor better reduce and control dust. You know, there's sometimes you might not see something and the meter might be picking up some very small particles. And so understanding what that is can help them direct themselves back to the right best management practice for controlling dust. And that's what our contract documents requires, follow those best management practices.
Okay, so that'll outline the regularity with which they're supposed to be monitoring with the handheld device.
Yeah, our monitoring plan will do that, and that's
Okay.
kind of up to the construction manager and their frequency.
Okay.
You know, there may be days where there is no earth moving and everything's covered, there's no visible dust. And so on those days, they might not do it. You know, there's no dust there. There could be days where it's really dusty. They're out, you know, sampling the air a lot and saying, hey, this is a problem, and let's fix
They
it,
need to
you know,
spray
cover
it more,
things.
or then
Yeah.
they're going to have an action plan for what they would
Yes,
do in that.
yeah.
Okay. Let's see. The other question I had was, you talked about dewatering, and this diagram here is pretty interesting. I guess you made a reference to, you don't want to do too much dewatering. So too much dewatering is because you'd be having too much settlement in the surrounding area? I mean,
Right.
Is that the main reason?
Yeah, that's really the main reason. You know, groundwater removal, as we've seen from some other projects around here, if you take the groundwater down too far, you can cause damage well beyond the site that you're working at. And so our methodology here engages us several different methods to really control the amount of groundwater that we have to take out to actually be able to dig that hole and build that facility. So by using that watertight shoring wall, and then instead of dewatering from outside, like that other picture that I
Right.
showed you, I think this one, that's not what we're doing. We're doing it opposite. We're controlling the groundwater. So it's essentially creating like this bathtub, an inverted bathtub, where the water is all on the outside, and we're only going to take the water out that's in, and then we're done, ideally,
And then you're waterproofing, obviously, and
Yeah,
keeping that water out.
right.
So.
And so at some point when we're doing the construction, the concrete work, we'll get the foundation poured, which is that very first level of concrete after we get the piles in, and that'll kind of seal up the bottom. And so when we get to that point, we can effectively reduce the amount of groundwater that we're taking out, if not stop. So that's kind of up to the geotech and the contractors that are doing this work. Everything's watertight. We can turn the groundwater system off. So this method gives us that flexibility and really controls the amount of groundwater withdrawal area-wide that we would not, if we didn't have this here, we would have to do something similar to get that deep. That groundwater cone of influence would go well beyond our property site. So
Yeah.
we've taken this approach by specifying these specific methods.
Okay.
That make sense?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. Actually, on a related question, I guess, you talked about the 3 different shoring options for your bidders. So do they have to, will you have qualifications? You said you'll have qualifications that they each will have to have, if they're bidding on this option, then they have to show experience with that option for like 1, 2, 3 projects, or? comparable kind of projects?
I'm not sure the exact number that we made there. It was extensive. And the idea here is that we're essentially culling from the broad contracting community. If they met our requirements, then they're invited to then put forth a bid. And so, they would bid on the areas that they felt that they were qualified for and give us a good price. And so our bid form will actually have 3 different shoring systems, and they'll fill in the one that they want to do, or 2, or maybe 3. There's some contractors that can do all 3.
Okay. That seems like a good system to me, to get
Yeah.
to get bidders in this.
It's good for quality and
in
it-
this construction environment, particularly.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. The other question I guess I had was about the easement. So that seems like a great option to keep to have another path for transport. For all the trucks. Other than, in addition to the streets, I guess. And so what's the status of the easement? Is that with the county right now? Or?
So, yeah, we've been negotiating with the county. We got their approval to receive the easement. We still need to go through the final process on the EIR and so forth. We're actually redoing the valuation of the easement. We had done that earlier, but we're redoing that because it's been some time. And so once we have that done, and once we get the approvals through yourselves and the council, then we'll be able to finalize the easement purchase for both the permanent easement where the tank is, and then these temporary construction easements like for the traffic flow and so forth. So,
Okay.
but everybody's in agreement with what the easements are, and so we don't anticipate any kind of issues going forward.
And that's what we were talking about earlier, that the use of that easement will be probably not feasible during blackout days and that kind of thing.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's just about it. I guess I had one other question. So you had a slide about open trench construction, and what is that comparing to? I guess I don't understand enough about that to know why that was a good option versus the sort of standard way.
Well, so open trench construction is actually the standard way, and we wanted to show you this because, there were some questions, well, why don't you use trenchless to build the whole thing? And so if we were to use trenchless construction, essentially that's using some kind of a machine that builds the pipe underground. And so when you do that, you're creating different pits, for lack of a better word. So you'd create these different spots, and then you would build your pipe underground between those different spots along this alignment. Well, that's a great methodology when you have really challenging soils or groundwater conditions, or you're crossing a river or something. This isn't very deep. I mean, this is pretty standard construction, and so it can go pretty quickly. The downside with trenchless construction in some contexts is that in order to build those pits, you have to make them similar to our UFES excavation. You have to make them watertight. They have to be safe. They're pretty good size, and they take up a lot of space. It's not just a hole in the ground. If there's a working area there, and there's machines and materials coming in there. So you're essentially creating these construction sites. And to do that in the middle of the road along Saratoga would, take a lot longer, in fact, to build this than open cut construction.
Okay.
And
that
so,
makes sense.
and it's much more expensive. And there's higher risk. The machine can get stuck. We have to go and dig it out. It's a lot of risk. And so to use that in lieu of open trench construction just isn't feasible for this.
Okay.
For a lot of reasons.
Great. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Commissioner Ebneter?
Thank you. Great presentation, you guys. It's a beautiful looking plan. If it gets built and you're able to pull it off with so many different things that can come at you with minimal complaints from the neighborhood, kudos to you. I've seen this plan a few times now, and the presentation is simple enough, but still technical enough to give me a good sense of what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to accomplish it. My concerns are the dewatering. I don't know how you are able to control it to that level that you've shown. I also am concerned about the dust and just the overall traffic. This is going to be a very large project for a long time, and you're right in the middle of 2 neighborhoods and a park and a school, so it's going to be difficult. I did go to the May 21st, 2019 meeting at the Event Center, and I've got the handout that you used that evening as part of your presentation, and I've got a couple of questions on that, which will dovetail into a few other questions, and I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible. I think, or I know that somebody had asked in the audience what was the cost of this project, and at that point, the answer was there was a $43 million estimate, which might be a guesstimate, but roughly $43 million. I was curious if that $43 million included all of the piping out in the public roadways, or if it was just standalone.
That cost is the total UFES project, which includes the pipeline.
Great. Also that evening, and again tonight on one of the slides, the operations and maintenance slides, it's been said that the facility can be used up to 20 times a year. So I'm slightly confused because I know that the peak wet weather flow is based on a storm every 5 years. And that is why I have always understood from presentations from Public Works that you needed this system to accommodate the peak wet weather flow. Is that true, or has that changed?
No, that's exactly true, and that's why we have the Baker tanks that were shown on the one slide that I showed you now, because we actually experience that now. So what we're trying to do is eliminate the sanitary sewer overflows. So the system just can't handle the volume of water. So this allows us to divert into this system. You know, right now we see, since I've been here for 5 years, I've seen maybe 6 or 8 of those occurrences in Delaware in one rainy season. I think one of the things by saying 20 is it gives us a lot of leeway, and there could be a potential for us if we're doing maintenance on a line downstream where we want to use the system to help us do the maintenance on the line downstream, just divert temporarily so we can do some maintenance or some kind of maybe repair, and then pump the system back. So it just gives us a lot of flexibility within the system.
Okay, so thank you. I did assume that you would be using it for maintenance. In fact, I think it's stated so somewhere in the documentation. Yet the peak wet weather flow, every document that I have seen is based on one storm every 5 years. It's in the executive summary, it's in the CEQAs, it's in numerous documents. So just a brief summary of where I've seen this project go, and please hear me out, because I'm trying to get some clarity specifically around this UFES, which is part of the Clean Water Program, as it would be associated with the in-storage system, correct? Not the full conveyance.
This is correct, yes.
Okay. So in 2016, the City Council approved an in-system storage program based on a wet weather peak flow of 98 million gallons. Study that was put together by the City of San Mateo in 2014. In 2017, the City Council approved, my dates are, I don't have the months, but they're close. 2017, the City Council approved the San Mateo Fairgrounds as the location for an in-storage system based on a 98 million gallon flow. In 2018, an addendum was issued by the city, and it's not dated that I can find, stating that the peak wet weather flow is 78 million gallons. The final EIR for the UFES document was based on the original EIR proposal, or EIR document, which has a 98 million gallon peak flow. So my question is, and the plant itself now can handle 78 million gallons on its own. So it could be apparently a full conveyance system because we've reduced the peak wet weather flow by 20 million gallons. So if this UFIS was part of a in-system storage for a 98 million gallon flow, and that additional 20 million gallons has been taken out of the project, why do we still need this storage?
Well, let me try, and I'll have Azalea Mitch back me up if I need to, but let me work backwards. So at the treatment plant, the system is set up to handle, well, first of all, one of the requirements that the Water Board asked us to meet was not to blend any of our raw sewage with treated sewage and send it into the bay. So we've created a system at the treatment plant where we can actually treat 60 million gallons a day through this system. There's a way we can do that when we have high wet weather. So we could treat 60 million gallons. The plant can actually take in 78 million gallons per day, and the way that happens is we're converting some of the basins there at the treatment plant to store 18 million gallons. So that's the 78 total that you had mentioned earlier, right? So 78 million gallons can reach a plant, we can deal with it. We estimate during the storms, the studies have shown during this high storm event that can occur, that we'll receive 98 million gallons within the entirety of the whole system. So the UFIS is being built, or previously called in-system storage, is being built to handle that extra 20 million gallons from the storm, so we can divert that. We can have other areas of the city go into the other pump stations and get to the plant, which creates the other 78 million gallons. So that's working backwards. That's how I would explain it. And if you need further explanation, Azalea is probably going to have to help me out.
Well, I was surprised when I found the addendum. I don't think the addendum was ever brought to the Planning Commission as part of any of the studies. And it clearly says that, now the peak wet weather flow is 78 million gallons. So I don't understand, we are working with two different peak wet weather flow volumes. And why? Why? Is the addendum really not valid?
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. Azalea Mitch, Deputy Public Works Director. So the flows haven't changed. The sewer shed does receive 98 million gallons a day. The capacity of the plant is 78 because we are holding back and storing that volume so that we don't have the SSOs given the size of the plant and the expansion. So the number is still 98. It's just that we're managing 78 at the plant, and we're holding back that extra within the UFIS.
Okay, I'll drop the issue because I have asked for the 98 million gallon study numerous times, and I have not received it to date. What the project overview for this addendum says on page 3 is facilities will be designed to handle influent flows of 21 million gallons a day, which changed, which is understandable. It started at roughly 13, it went, I think, to 15, now it's around 21, with projected...
21 is the maximum month at the treatment
with
plant.
projected population growth. So you've got the 21 million gallons there at a dry weather day.
Right, maximum month.
Maximum, right. And the peak weather, the next sentence is the peak weather flows of 78 million gallons a day will be processed by the preliminary treatment facilities and then diverted to the secondary units. So that's when I saw that in the addendum, and I see this EIR is based on a 2014 calculation, they don't match.
So the treatment plant, right, under full conveyance would have been built or expanded to treat 98 million gallons a day. And that would have required, there was no space for that. So that space, that storage volume is being built within the collection system so that the treatment plant can handle 78. The entire system as a whole will be able to handle that 98 MGD. It's just that we're holding it back. It's like the analogy I like to use is just how fast you're going, right? If you're going at full speed, you're going to see that 98, but we're throttling it back and we're slowing down by storing some of that capacity within the system so that the treatment plant doesn't have to be as large.
I totally understand the concept. The language in the addendum says differently.
So we can go back and look at that, but it's still the 98 and the treatment plant is 78.
Okay.
I believe that's the language that you're reading. So if you keep it in context, the 21 million gallons is talking about the average daily dry weather flow at the plant. And then the next sentence, as you said, talks about 78 million gallons. It's not talking about the whole system. It's talking about at the treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions.
Okay, thank you. The only question I had, Brad, that wasn't brought up already by one of the commissioners, the specific location of that underground facility in the parking lot, because I know that years ago there was a lot of other proposed locations or alternatives, and this was considered and voted to be the best. But within that actual parking lot, because it is a large parking lot area, was that area chosen because it was deemed to be the least disruptive or impactful to the surrounding neighborhood, or was it picked because of its proximity to the existing lines? Like, what was just for that specific part of the parking lot, can you help me understand why that area was picked? Because it is quite close to along the Fiesta Gardens.
Right. Actually, that was really driven by the event center and their needs on the site. That space currently gets used for storage now for vehicles and trailers and so forth for them. That way, that can remain the same kind of usage after the fact. And they actually have thoughts of doing a master plan for their site and doing some other potential development on that site. So that was driven by them. I think if we could, we'd be closer to Delaware, but that wasn't possible.
Okay, so the event center parking lot was the chosen site. That part of the parking lot was based on the event center's capabilities or
That's
preferences.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Were there any other questions that any commissioners had that came up?
I have one follow-up question through the chair. In your easement diagram, it shows that the easement, the traffic is going to be running through the event center adjacent to the park. Have you decided whether to do the wall around the park before or after? I know it's been said that you do after, but have you looked into see about doing it before? Because if the construction trucks coming in and out are going to be adjacent to the park, then we'll have a lot of materials, dust and other materials going into the park.
So the wall actually will be built along the event center area that we're actually going to utilize for our site. So along the park, the bulk of the park will stay as is with the fence that's there now. As far as the block wall we intend to build along the portion of the park site where our storage tank will go, is that we can consider that. We just saw that request as you did, so that's something we talked about today. I believe it's a possibility to go ahead and do that up front. I guess the risk there is, it could get damaged during construction with just the activity that they're doing. So that is a bit of a concern. We don't want to, rebuild the wall, over again. So, but it is something we'll definitely look into.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, terrific. Any other questions? No? Okay. Then why don't any final commentary or input on the proposed project from commissioners? Commissioner Maldonado, any other comment? Commissioner Ebnetter?
I do not. I'm just interested to, hopefully we have enough time prior to our next meeting to go through the 470 comments from the public. Maybe we can get that packet earlier than the Thursday, would be my concern. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to come in here fully prepared. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mallory, any final comments?
Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate the ongoing dialogue between the staff and the community. It's really valuable to have the community engaged and giving ongoing comment and ongoing suggestions. And I really appreciate how responsive the staff has been all along here. And what we saw today, I think, has been a culmination of an awful lot of discussion. And well, for a layperson like me, I really appreciate how much sense it makes when we go through it. After reading through the notice from the Bay Meadows Association, I was thinking it might be a positive way to handle things if a point person is chosen from the Fiesta Gardens neighborhood and the Bay Meadows neighborhood during the construction phase. That way, I think that would enable the staff to funnel comments and updates and things on a regular basis to one person who could then take it to their homeowner association, and they would have emails and whatever. Because I agree with what Brad said, that the snail mail often gets there after the fact, and it's kind of a moot point. And just for sustainability, I would like to see mailers not used for something like this. So those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams?
I do have one last thing. It almost seems like an aside in a way, but the electrical building that's indicated at the corner is to house the generator, I understand. Is that correct? So what's the time that the generator will operate if needed?
Ideally, never.
Yeah, right.
You know, I think you could anticipate that it gets tested, you know, probably
Regularly.
1 hour every quarter. They'll go out and run it. I think the city does that right now with a generator that's right there at the Bay Meadows pump station. So similar to that, it's a small
Okay.
generator.
Okay.
It's got a sound enclosure on it. But, you know, if we looked at, you know, the hydraulic modeling and all the different scenarios, the worst case scenario over the period would be that there's a 3-day outage and everything's flooded and UFES is full for a long time and the generator's running. So right now I think it has a 48-hour
Okay.
fuel capacity. After that,
Okay.
it's going to turn off.
Great.
But ideally, you know, it's an emergency standby generator, and so
Right,
it's
yeah.
not intended to be used.
But I wasn't
other-
sure if it was like a 90-minute generator or 24 hours or what.
As long as it takes to get power back up in that area.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So my final comments and input. So I do appreciate, I thought this was a very thorough and comprehensive update on the plan and the updates, specifically the updates and changes that you've made to the plan. And I noted in the materials, and you spoke that a lot of these changes are coming at additional cost to the project, but it's well worth the additional cost and to be responsive to the neighborhoods. And I would understand and expect that the plan will continue to be modified and updated all the way up through the presentation in October to the City Council. And I know that there's a lot of, I know we got the notice a day or two ago from the Homeowners Association. I know that there's going to be considerable more input that comes in once the revised EIR comes out. So I think that's important. I wanted to highlight a couple of items that I've been hearing. One was the comments, both in writing and from that several of the speakers raised, that this is a high wind area, that dust control is a very important concern to the neighbors. So I do appreciate, Brad, I think you mentioned that you would consider fencing and other suppressive measures early in the project to help to mitigate that. I think that's helpful instead of at the end of the project. And then the last item I want to mention is just the, well, two more things. I would encourage you to please do proactively engage with the residents and the community on the pedestrian and bicycle plan, because those are the residents who live and are in that area every day, and I think they will have the most salient input to a well-informed plan, especially given all the other projects that I know you're trying to mitigate around, but all the other projects that are going around that area. And then the last item I'll say is, again, I find this to be extremely responsive and a lot of proactive changes to the construction plan, addressing the feedback from the community. I would strongly encourage you, as part of the final plan, to consider, leveraging, I know there's a site plan, but consider, really going above and beyond on the transparency, how you're communicating with the neighborhood and the city and the public. I think you mentioned there was going to be some regular memos on the project, putting those up on the website, sharing real-time information on the noise measurements and the vibration measurements. I think it would go a long way to building trust and transparency with the communities if you're leveraging that website that's available to everybody and to the public to share that kind of information, and it might also be an efficient way of sharing it as well. So that's my comments and input, and I want to thank you, and looking forward to the next steps of the project. Okay. So that will end item 2 of the consent calendar. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I appreciate that. We'll go to reports and announcements.
So I just want to go ahead and highlight a few projects that are coming before you in future meetings. So on September 10th, the Hayward Park Station will be coming before you as a study session. And then on September 24th, the public hearing for the UFAS project, for this project, will be before you. In addition to that, I think we're aware that Commissioner Etheridge will be coming in at about 7:30, so we're looking at an additional item that might be sort of slotted in between 7 and 7:30.
Yeah, it's fluid. I might actually be able to be here at 7. So.
Oh. Awesome. So then the one other meeting that's coming up in October 10th, it's going to be the single-family viewer project. So that's it for the list of projects that are coming up.
Okay, excellent. Any reports and announcements from fellow commissioners? No? I wanted to mention one item. On July 23rd, this commission met to review and recommend changes to study areas for the general plan, and subsequently the city council reviewed those recommendations and declined to adopt our recommendations, which is their role in the process. But I did want to make a mention that I was actually very proud of the dialogue and the conversation that we had at that meeting and the changes that were unanimously suggested by this commission. And I feel like we fulfilled our role in that process, and it was time well spent in dialogue with each other and with the community. And so I just wanted to mention that. All right. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.